But when they play those types of teams, they are thinking more and more, not like, wow, it's great that we're here, but more like we have every right to believe that we can beat these teams.
One of the potential favorites to bring it home, taking on Guatemala Sunday on FS1, 4 p.m. Eastern time in Minneapolis. And for a full preview of that, we go to our Canadian football correspondent, Joshua Kloke. All right, Josh, what do you make of this match? This is a Canadian team under Jesse Marsch that expectations have risen. The type of players that he's been able to produce have risen as well. What do we think is going to happen against Guatemala? Give us a full breakdown.
Yeah, I think Canada are justifiably the favorites in this match, considering how far they've climbed as a team, how much talent they have, how much skill they have. You know, you could make a case they're arguably the most talented team still in the competition right now. But I think Guatemala is very likely going to take a page out of El Salvador's playbook. El Salvador, Canada in their last group stage game was one of the ugliest matches we've seen at the Gold Cup, and certainly one of the ugliest matches we've seen in recent Canadian men's national team history. El Salvador tried to play Canada hard, physical. There were 2 red cards handed out to El Salvador before the first half finished. While I don't expect 2 red cards to be handed out again, it is likely that Guatemala really tries to slow the pace of play down because Canada is arguably the fastest team in the tournament. That's what they have in their arsenal, is their speed. And if you can kind of frustrate Canada, slow them down, you'll have a good chance of, at maybe catching them on the counter. The thing about Canada is they're still learning game management, right? It's a part of their game that is still evolving, learning how to work referees, learning how to keep their cool in CONCACAF games. So I think if Guatemala can go in and try to really stifle Canada, frustrate them, they might have a chance there. Again, it shouldn't take long once Canada, open things up. We've seen that with Jonathan David and Tajon Buchanan. They have so much skill on their squad right now. But Guatemala are going to really try to make things difficult. And for the first half against El Salvador, Canada didn't have an answer. So you could make a case that that is the right way to play Canada right now.
Speaking of Tajon Buchanan, I wanted to get your thoughts on his tournament because he's been fantastic. And this is obviously an important summer for him, where he's going to be playing his club football, whether he'll stay with Inter, whether he'll go back on loan. He's definitely showing out to the clubs in Europe that are watching him play because he's been the leader for this Canadian side, and his pace has been massive for Canada. What do you make of his tournament, and what do you want to see from him continuing to move on in a World Cup year next year?
Yeah, Tajon Buchanan is at his best when he's operating with a chip on his shoulder, right? He's one of those players that has that deep fire, that inner competitiveness in him. We saw that before the 2022 World Cup when he was Canada's best player and he was trying to show the world what he's about. Now he's operating after a real gruesome injury that took him out of Copa America. He's really trying to find his game again, and he's on record saying that Inter Milan didn't even contact him to see if he wanted to come to the Club World Cup. So I think that kind of fire is still very much present in him. I suspect he goes on loan again. While he's shown through the Gold Cup, and frankly, he showed through the World Cup as well, that he has the talent, the raw skill to compete, to make a team of Inter's, obviously, status. But I think it's just more likely that with the World Cup coming up, he will want to play as much as possible and not so much fight for a roster spot, but get a, get a roster spot all year. Excuse me. So I think it's very likely that he goes somewhere and goes on loan and tries to maximize his playing time there.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Canada coach. Of course, Jesse Marsch is always going to be everyone's biggest topic as he comes in and has played a bit of a heel role. But the question is not how has that affected the team, but also how can they take that onto the field and make that mean something in terms of the results now heading into a year where they're co-hosting the World Cup?
When Jesse Marsch took over Canada, the thing he noticed right away is this team is uber skilled, uber athletic, uber nice, right? And I think as Canadians, we know that's kind of a cliche thing to say about us, and that's fine. But in international competitions, niceness doesn't get you very far. And it's not so much that he thought this team was too polite and not competitive enough. what he saw was this team didn't have that inner arrogance, that braggadocio that really, really good teams have. And part of this is the game management that we spoke about earlier. But Jesse Marsch has spent the better part of his first year in charge trying to make his team, frankly, and I know we're relying on cliches here, he's trying to make his team a little more American, a little more arrogant, a little more, outwardly prideful. And I think for some Canadians, that feels a little bit uncomfortable. But I think for a lot of Canadian soccer fans, they're probably saying, yeah, Canada has always needed more of this, right? And I know for a fact that, a lot of Canadian players have felt overlooked in CONCACAF by referees, by officials. And so a big part of Jesse Marsch's first year is trying to get them to change their mentality, again, to be a little nastier on the pitch. We've seen a lot more of that. We saw that in Copa America. It was very much a coming out party of that attitude. And I think we're seeing that more and more. How that can help them when they play the likes of the United States and the Mexico, we don't know if they will play them this tournament, but when they play those types of teams, they are thinking more and more, not like, wow, it's great that we're here, but more like we have every right to believe that we can beat these teams. And it's that inherent self-belief and that inherent arrogance, frankly, that inherent ego that was maybe missing in past Canadian squads. That is probably the final piece that this team was missing because, again, the skill is there, the talent is there. Now there's a very clear tactical plan. When you match in that competitiveness, that ego, you have a much better chance of going further in tournaments. And I think that's something Canada is really going to rely on come 2026.
Yeah, what I've noticed with Jesse Marsch and this Canadian team is that it's very defined roles. Players understand their roles, and they're not trying to complicate things. And that's what I see from Jesse Marsch, the approach he's trying to give this Canadian national team. So how important is it to get the result in a tournament like this, to kind of put the stamp of approval finally on Jesse Marsch so the Canadians fans understand this is our guy going forward, and we're confident that he can take us to new lengths?
You'd be hard-pressed right now to find a Canadian soccer fan that isn't confident in Jesse Marsch, just because of how much he has overhauled this team tactically from a few years ago, right? I think this Canadian team has been building since the likes of Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, Tajon Buchanan really came into their own. But it was that kind of tactical plan that was lacking. So I don't think you're going to find a lot of Canadians that don't have belief in Jesse Marsch, because I can tell you, talking to, up and down the roster, players have a belief in Jesse Marsch's tactical plan. It's demanding, yes, but players have that self-belief. Again, this team has really evolved over the past 5 or 6 years, and John Herdman deserves a lot of credit for that as well. But it's Jesse that has really looked at this team and said, incredible athletes. And I have worked with incredible athletes in the Red Bull system before. It's easy to just say high pressing, but once you give these players instruction on, we know you're fast, we know you're quick, we know you're aggressive, here's how to use it to influence games better. I think it's that tactical plan that was another piece that was missing. And it's frankly just incredible to see how far this Canadian team has evolved. Because again, they came into the 2022 World Cup as a team that looked like they could surprise. But once they played a team like Croatia, tactical masterminds, they were out of answers. I think when you go into the 26 World Cup with the tactical plan that Jesse has, Canada should be considered a lot more dangerous, because it's just that next step of this team that they were lacking before. And frankly, I think that's why a lot of Canadians have been so impressed with Jesse Marsch.
And their next opportunity coming on Sunday against Guatemala. Josh, thank you so much for the time, and looking forward to seeing their run here through the rest of the Gold Cup.
You bet. Thanks, guys.